All right, welcome to another episode of F1 News, where we always bring you an analytical perspective, but always with a hint of laughter. So let's start. So we're going to get started with the first story we're going to talk about is Perez. So Perez has come out and said, so two things about Perez. He said that the big issue with Red Bull was that they really lost a lot when they lost Adrian Newey. He was comparing Red Bull to Mercedes. He said that Mercedes had a powerful engine, and they won for 6 years in a row with what's his name, Rosberg and Hamilton. They won for 6. But he said that the thing about Mercedes was that they had a powerful engine that nobody else could touch. But he said that Red Bull's advantage was very, very nuanced. It was just a small thing that was making them better than everybody else. I think he didn't say specifically, but I think he's talking about their aerodynamics and having Adrian Newey. That was the difference. Engine was not their difference. It was the aerodynamics. And
yes,
he didn't mention it. And from what I've seen is that once Newey left, the car still has its pointy features and everything, but not having the aerodynamicist there is a problem because setup can't change all the problems that you have with the car, because the aerodynamicist has to link everything. You link the front of the car with the back, with the floor, even with the tires. It's holistic. People think that, if you change the floor of a car, that could solve the problem, but it changes the whole dynamic of the whole car. So having Newey there didn't cause this first trouble, because even when Newey was there was troubles. But Newey being there would have made it easier for them to figure out problems moving forward with aerodynamics, because we see now that whenever they make changes, something else has happened. Like I know they were having rear instability, so now they try to balance it off, then they have problems with the front. So the idea is that not having a designer, or not especially someone who's very good with aerodynamics, is hurting them, because I think that's the one element that is behind. The car still has speed, but it has a narrower window. So having a very good aerodynamicist, and then also guys like losing Whitmarsh, is has been very tough for them. And it's not like Mercedes, where if you lose your aerodynamicist, you still have a good team of people with engine and other things. What do you think, Mr. Johnny?
Yeah, well, I see it like like football, soccer. When you lose your maybe your striker, your main man in front, or you lose somebody that that does something like in the midfield, somebody that you have key in the midfield. So when you lose that person, lose that component, then things start looking shaky. So yeah. I think that's not what happened with Newey. He was their main man there. So I'm just going back thinking about how Red Bull was actually on point. But now, and I think now when Newey left and some people left, I started seeing some inconsistencies in Red Bull. Yeah, but I thought he left a long time. When did he leave?
No, he left last year.
Just last year.
Last year. But before he left, they were dropping off. So my theory is that they were dropping off around Miami and stuff, and then Checo started struggling. I think that was because, personally, the way that Verstappen drives, it leads to the car being exaggerated too much to the front. Not just the setup. The whole function of the car was changing. Also, they didn't have a lot of money, so they weren't putting money into their number 2 driver and number 2 car. But I think also, at some point, Newey noticed that the car was bad, and I think they put in that cheating device, the symmetric device. So the car was slowing down. But I think at that moment, they could have turned it around, and they're still turning it around now. They had a crisis in the middle of the season. Not a real crisis, but there was a problem, and I think it could have been solved. But Newey leaving made that solution, the process of the solution, more difficult. And now we see that the car is getting better this year, but their engineer, Pierre Wache, he's a good engineer, but he's more for day-to-day setup than the overall design of the car. And we have to remember that their car is not just a normal design. Like, for example, McLaren is a normal design, normal balance, perfect balance between front and back. Their car is more pointy because that's what Verstappen needs. So when you have a pointy car like that, it's very aerodynamic, and then you're going to need someone like Newey there to balance it off. And I think that's why Newey put that redistribution thing in the car last time, so that guys like Checo can also balance a car that may not be the type of car that they want to drive, since Verstappen likes driving basically a jet. You notice how a jet's front is very pointy.
Yeah, I remember Red Bull had...
Go ahead, yeah.
They had this particular kind of setup, they were always the car was always tilted a bit to the ground, and then they also had a lot of ground, what they call it, as they stayed on the ground force. Yes, that's why They were
Yeah, so
always
they were,
sparking.
they were able to have everything, and so that's what Adrian Newey's PhD was in aerodynamics. So aerodynamics is a lot more important for Red Bull than it is for McLaren. McLaren is not really aerodynamics. They have aero efficiency, but they have fantastic balance. But Red Bull is known for, like you said, it's like a jet. So basically, for that type of car, you need to have a genius like what's his name there, Newey, so to balance off things. And I think that losing him was a big loss for them. I'm not dissing the team, but they need him since their team doesn't rely on engine power like Mercedes or in balance like McLaren. What do you think, Kunle?
Yeah, I see there's a difference in the culture in the different teams. Teams like McLaren and Mercedes, they are more of a team culture than teams like Red Bull and Ferrari, which seem to be more driven by flair and passion and individualism, which is why we see Red Bull focusing on one car, and we see Ferrari experimenting with the teams every other race. Those teams are not like, so if McLaren and Mercedes were to lose a technician in their team, I think that they would survive a lot better. The only weakness that McLaren has is race management. They need a little bit of flair, a few more people in their team with race.
Yeah, they just need common sense. They need common sense.
They need something like that, but everything else about them technically is fine. And it's almost enough to win a championship even without that. But with that, they should be solid. So that's the problem for McLaren. When I look at Red Bull, it's just culturally, it looks like it's going to go like Rome. It's going to eventually disappear into nothingness. Like Williams used to be a very professional team, but I think that
but Williams is back. Actually, they have the best. I think they have the best team principal, James Bowles. He's very good.
Yes.
Williams is back.
Exactly, and they're coming back, and they're coming back with that same team culture spirit. Red Bull gives me that it feels like they're not here to stay. Red Bull feels like as soon as Verstappen leaves them, they're going to start falling in the bottom half of Formula One grid, and within 5 years they're going to be
But
gone.
I think
feel that's
Adrian
what happens to them if they lose Verstappen.
I'll give this guy credit though. Horner built Red Bull by. So if you know, Horner started off as a driver, but he wasn't good enough to make it to F1. I'm not dissing him because he was good. Then he said, "I love F1." So, hold on, but let me tell you a story. Then he said, "I love F1." So when he said he loves F1, he bought an F3 team with his own money. He borrowed money from 1,000 people that stood it up. Then he took over from Jaguar. So I think that Newey is driven. Not Newey. I think Horner does not want to leave F1, and he wants to keep that team. It's just that he had to bring in Red Bull because they had the money with marketing. You see what I'm saying? But I do think that Horner is committed to staying. I think if Red Bull drops the funding, he'll find funding from someone. And it seems like Horner is just like Toto Wolff. Toto Wolff was an orphan, and now he's a billionaire. These are guys. He said that he remembered how hungry he was when he was young. Or no, he wasn't an orphan. His dad lost his job. His dad was poor or something. He said it will never happen again. So guys like Horner and Wolff, they're like alpha guys who refuse to lose. You understand what I'm saying? What do you think, Kunle?
Yeah.
I think it's just that Red Bull label, they don't care so much about F1. But I think he has to use them because they bring the money. What do you think?
Yeah, I think that I forgot what I was going to say, and I had it on the tip of my tongue. I was going to talk
No, but we were
about
talking about you're saying that they're not in it for the long run.
Yeah, they're not in. Yeah, exactly. I remember now. So what I was going to say, the difference between the two cars, if you remove the two drivers from McLaren and you put any other random two drivers from the rest of the 18 Formula One drivers into McLaren would still be in the top 4. If you did that with Red Bull would be between 12th and 16th.
Yeah, you're right.
That's the difference between the two cars. That's
but
why I say that.
I would say this much. If you put what I'm trying to say is I think Red Bull, like I said, is a special type of car made for Verstappen, so it has a high window. So if you put Robo Driver in McLaren, you put Robo Driver in Red Bull will win. Because Robo Driver would be able to maximize the potential of the Red Bull, but that potential is so narrow. You understand what I'm saying? That only not even Verstappen is good enough to push that car to its ultimate limit. You get my point?
Which is a problem for the car, because Verstappen won't last forever. The team should last longer, which means that Red Bull doesn't have a long lifespan.
And also the advantage and they have a problem though, because Verstappen doesn't drive well on slow corners. So if you gave him a McLaren car, he would win, but he wouldn't win as much as by what he could win in his Red Bull if he knows how to hook it up right. So the problem is that Verstappen is a radical driver. It's sort of like, remember how Liverpool used to win with Jurgen Klopp? They can only play one way. They have to play that super press. If they played a conventional game, they wouldn't win. So what I'm saying is that the only way Verstappen knows how to drive is by putting extreme frontiness. I believe that if every track in F1 was like Suzuka, then Verstappen would win all races. You get my point? Because that's the way he wants to drive. And he's finding it hard to adapt to slow corners because that's not his way of driving. So it's very complex. But I do think
that's
that
the beauty of Formula One. It challenges you with slow corners and fast corners, bends, corkscrews, gradients.
Yeah.
It's not one thing. It's not like an oval. You know,
but
so
you know what they say? They say that. But the thing is, that's actually for the car, though, not for the driver, though. You get my point? They say that slow corners make bad drivers look good. You get my point? Because it's all about a slow corner. It's all
that's
about.
That's what the good drivers say.
But you know why? Because
that's the excuse they
slow corner. That's why Mercedes, to do well on a slow corner, you have to have traction and grip. That's not the driver, that's the car. But to do well on high-speed corners, you have to be able to feel the grip yourself, or you'll go off the track. So that's why they say Verstappen is the best. And Schumacher too. Schumacher would have made Michael. Have you ever seen when he's driving? Because the car was so on edge that it would go off balance, but he would quickly rechange it again.
Correct it, yeah.
The slow corner basically exposes the limits of
perfect
the car.
Example when
this is what you're saying. Basically, what you're saying is that the slow corners expose the limits of the car. No matter how good you are, you don't have to take it the same way. There's no advantage there.
But the high corners exposes the limits of the drive. You get my point?
Yes.
We need to coin that. That's our theory now. But
No, I think I just love that coining that we just. That's a theory. That's a Formula One fanatic theory that just come out. You know, that we just pointed out.
The slow corners expose the limits of the car. The fast corners expose the limits of the drive.
Yes, we're gonna put that one.
That was a good one. That's actually a good. I haven't heard anybody else say that, so we have to. and so we all have credit. We worked it out. Quinley came up with part of it, and we finished it off for it. I take part of the credit. I'm just kidding. But okay, so let's switch. So